step away from the car right now.
I'm a medic. She's unstable. Give me a second.
I said back away.
No, listen to me. She's fading. I need to keep pressure here.
You don't ignore orders on my scene.
Help me. Don't stop me. Ma'am, stay with me. Keep looking at me. Don't close your eyes.
Move now.
Do not pull me right now. She needs airway support. I'm the one keeping her breathing.
Can a single arrest destroy a decorated career? When a patrolman interfered with a Navy SEAL medic during a life-or-death emergency, it set off a chain reaction no one saw coming. You won't believe the evidence investigators uncovered after they tore through the footage, the reports, and the witness statements. What started on the shoulder of a wet Virginia highway didn't end as a routine arrest. It ended as a career collapse. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you follow stories about abuse of power, real consequences, and people who stay sharp when somebody else loses control, hit like and subscribe. This one's centered on Chief Hospital Corpsman Darius Cole, a Black Navy SEAL medic with years inside the kind of environments where panic gets people killed. He wasn't loud, wasn't reckless. He was the kind of man who assessed first, moved second, and didn't waste words. That mattered because by the time this story started, a woman was bleeding on the pavement, traffic was backing up, and one patrolman was about to make the worst decision of his career. The trouble started just after sunset on a stretch of highway outside Virginia Beach. Roads were slick from earlier rain. Visibility was still decent, but the pavement had that greasy look that made every sudden stop dangerous. Two vehicles had collided hard near the right shoulder. One had spun half sideways. The other had its front end crushed in enough to tell anyone paying attention that this wasn't a minor fender bender. Cole had been driving home when he saw the wreck. He pulled over without hesitation, grabbed a compact trauma kit from the back of his vehicle, and moved in fast. Not rushed. Controlled. Big difference. A few bystanders had already stopped, but they were doing what most untrained people do at a bad crash. Standing too close. Talking too much. Looking at each other for answers nobody had. One woman had called 911 and kept saying the injured driver was fading. Another man kept trying to open a damaged door from the wrong angle and making things worse. Cole took over because somebody had to. He checked the scene, made sure there was no immediate fire risk, then focused on the victim in the worst shape. Lindsay Mercer, mid-40s, semi-conscious. She had visible facial trauma, a deep cut near the scalp line, and signs that worried him more than the bleeding did. Her breathing pattern looked wrong. Her attention drifted in and out. She wasn't tracking properly. That told him this could go south fast. He identified himself as a medic, told the bystanders exactly what he needed, and got them moving. One person directed traffic away from the shoulder. Another held a phone light steady. Another stayed on with dispatch and relayed what Cole found. That's how real scene control works. Not yelling, assignments. Within a minute, he had the victim positioned as safely as possible, pressure controlled on one wound, and his focus on keeping her airway stable while watching for spinal risk. He didn't know how long EMS would take. On roads like that, even a few minutes mattered. And this is where the whole thing turned. The first patrol unit arrived before fire rescue. That by itself wasn't unusual. A lot of accident scenes start with law enforcement securing traffic before medics fully take over. The problem wasn't the arrival. It was the read. Patrolman Brent Holloway stepped out of his cruiser and saw a black man in civilian clothes leaning into a damaged vehicle with blood on his hands and a medical kit open on the ground. Instead of taking 2 seconds to assess what was happening, he came in hot and wrong. He started issuing commands immediately. Step back. Move away from the vehicle. Don't touch anything else. He treated the scene like he had caught somebody interfering, not somebody keeping a victim alive. Cole looked up, kept one hand where it needed to be, and told him he was a Navy SEAL medic rendering emergency aid. He reported it cleanly, no attitude, no challenge, just facts, because facts should have solved this right there. They didn't. Holloway demanded compliance again. Cole responded the same way a disciplined medic would. He explained that the victim needed stabilization and that pulling him off in that moment could make her condition worse. He also said EMS was still en route and that he was maintaining care until they arrived. That should have been enough for any officer with basic judgment. It wasn't enough for Holloway. This was the first real sign of what investigators later focused on. The patrolman wasn't trying to understand the scene. He was trying to dominate it. Big difference. A competent officer arrives, identifies roles, secures the perimeter, and supports life safety. Holloway skipped that and went straight to control for control's sake. Bystanders noticed it too. Phones started to come up, quietly at first. People always sense when something stops looking normal. They could see the injured woman. They could see Cole working. They could hear the patrolman pushing harder than the situation called for. That changed the energy right away. Now there were witnesses watching not just the crash, but the officer. Cole kept working. He told the bystanders to stay calm and keep the victim talking if she could respond. He checked her breathing again. It had gotten weaker. He asked for an ETA from dispatch through one of the witnesses. He was still doing the job. Still focused. Holloway didn't like that. He moved closer and repeated that nobody was going to ignore his commands on his scene. That was the mindset. His scene. His authority. His ego. The injured woman was becoming secondary, and that's the part that later made the footage impossible to defend. Cole tried one more time to get through to him. He identified his training again, told him the victim was unstable, told him he'd step back when qualified responders physically took over. That was measured. Reasonable. Exactly what any sane person would want to hear from someone giving emergency care. Holloway treated it as defiance. He started pressing on identification, asking who Cole thought he was, demanding credentials in the middle of active treatment. Like this was a traffic stop and not a medical emergency. Cole told him where his identification was and why he wasn't taking his hands off the patient to dig for a wallet. Again, sensible. Again, wasted on the wrong man. By then, the phones were fully out. One bystander moved closer from the shoulder and said the medic had been there first and was helping. Another said the victim had nearly stopped responding before Cole stabilized her. Holloway shut that down too. He didn't want input. He wanted submission. That was the mistake. Not the last one, the first big one. Because now there was Bodycam running, multiple civilian recordings, and a growing group of witnesses seeing an officer choose a power struggle over obvious medical reality. Once that happens, a bad decision doesn't stay local. It travels. Cole leaned back in, checked the victim again, and adjusted his pressure placement as her breathing shifted. He told Holloway one more time that if he wanted to help, he needed to keep the scene clear and let medical care continue. Clean, direct, professional. Holloway stepped forward anyway. He reached down toward Cole's shoulder while the medic was still working over the victim. Patrolman Brent Holloway reached for Darius Cole's shoulder while Cole was still holding pressure and watching the injured woman's breathing. Cole told him he was in the middle of active medical care and that pulling him away could make her worse. He said it plainly. He did not raise his voice. He did not turn it into an argument. He just kept working and explained the risk. Holloway did not stop. He ordered Cole to step back immediately. Cole answered that the woman was unstable and needed a few more seconds before he could safely let go. That should have ended it. Any officer with common sense would have recognized what was happening, secured traffic, and let the trained medic do his job until fire rescue arrived. Holloway made it personal instead. He kept pressing on authority. He acted like Cole's calm tone was disrespect. He demanded identification right there, while Cole still had both hands occupied with the victim. Cole told him where his identification was and why he was not about to take his hands off an injured woman to reach into his pocket. That answer was reasonable. Holloway treated it like refusal. The people standing around could see exactly what was happening. They had already watched Cole take control of a messy crash scene and turn it into something organized. He had directed bystanders, protected the victim, and kept her from being moved the wrong way. Then Holloway arrived and started turning the whole scene into a power fight. That was when more phones came out. One woman filming from the shoulder said Cole had been the only person there who knew what he was doing. Another bystander said the victim had started fading before Cole stabilized her. Holloway shut them down too. He did not want information. He wanted compliance. Then he escalated again. He grabbed Cole harder and ordered him away from the vehicle. Cole tried to finish one critical step before moving. He was still focused on the woman. He kept explaining that she needed support and pressure maintained until paramedics took over. Holloway yanked him back anyway. The woman's body shifted when Cole was pulled off balance. A bystander shouted. Another person moved forward, then stopped when Holloway started threatening people at the edge of the scene. That was the moment the entire stop changed. Up to then, Holloway could still have claimed he misunderstood what he saw. The second he physically removed a medic from an injured woman who was actively being treated, that excuse started falling apart. Cole did not fight him. That mattered later. He did not swing, shove, or posture. He kept telling Holloway the same thing. The woman needed care. He kept trying to give medical information even while Holloway forced his arm behind his back. Holloway pushed him toward the shoulder, bent his wrist, and handcuffed him while the victim was still inside reach of the open trauma kit. That image did damage before any investigation even began. A trained black military medic on the roadside, hands behind his back, while the woman he had been helping was left without him for no good reason. People did not need legal analysis to understand how bad that looked. They could see it. And Holloway kept talking. His body camera captured the whole shift in tone. He dismissed Cole's military and medical background instead of checking it. He talked like nobody at the scene had the right to act unless he approved it first. He framed Cole as a problem because Cole had not instantly stepped aside when ordered. That was his whole logic. Not danger, not confusion, not safety. Obedience. That body camera footage later wrecked him. Cole stayed seated on the shoulder after Holloway cuffed him. He kept asking whether someone was maintaining the woman's airway and bleeding control. Even then, he was still focused on the victim. That is what made Holloway look even worse. Cole was not trying to save himself first. He was trying to get the officer to stop making the medical situation worse. Then fire rescue arrived. Fire Captain Elena Ruiz came in with her crew and saw the problem immediately. An injured woman was still in the vehicle, and the person in handcuffs next to the road had medical gloves on, blood on his hands, and a trauma kit open on the ground. That is not a hard scene to read. Paramedic Josh Levin went straight to the victim. Ruiz took one look at Cole, then at Holloway, and understood that somebody had interrupted active care. The response from the medical side was immediate. Levin picked up where Cole had been forced to stop. Ruiz started asking what happened. Holloway tried to present it as scene interference and failure to follow orders. That version did not hold up for even a minute. The bystanders were already speaking over each other, all telling the same story. Cole had stopped to help. Cole had identified himself as a medic. Cole had been treating the woman before Holloway arrived. Holloway had pulled him away anyway. Ruiz and Levin could see the treatment pattern for themselves. The way the victim had been positioned. The supplies laid out. The pressure controls set up. None of it looked random. None of it looked unsafe. It looked like professional emergency care. Levin later stated that Cole's actions before the arrest were medically appropriate and likely helped keep the woman from getting worse before emergency medical services took over. That statement became a major problem for Holloway later because it moved the case out of the area of simple bad judgment and into something more serious. He had not just been rude. He had interfered with necessary care. Cole sat there in handcuffs while trained responders finished the work he should have been allowed to continue. He still did not give Holloway what he seemed to want. No outburst, no threats, no dramatic scene. just short answers and repeated concern for the patient. That also mattered. Bad officers often count on the other person losing control. It makes the paperwork easier. It gives them something to point to later. Holloway did not get that. He got a composed service member with a clean record, a roadside full of witnesses, and a body camera footage that did not match the story he was already starting to build in his head. The mood at the scene turned fast once the ambulance left. The crash itself was no longer the center of attention. The arrest was. People stayed behind to give names and statements. Several said they had the whole thing on video and would send it out that night. Holloway still acted like he could manage the narrative because he had the badge, the handcuffs, and the first report. He was wrong. Cole had the truth on camera. The bystanders had angles his body camera did not. The medical responders had professional opinions Holloway could not talk over. And once all of that left the roadside, the case stopped belonging to him. That night, Patrolman Brent Holloway wrote the first report. He claimed Darius Cole interfered with the scene, refused orders, and forced the arrest. He leaned on the usual wording: noncompliance, officer safety, obstruction. The problem was simple. The videos did not support him. By the end of the night, bystander clips were already online. People saw the same sequence in every version. A Black Navy SEAL medic stopped at a crash, treated an injured woman, identified himself, and got arrested while she still needed help. The department could not sit on it. The next morning, the case went to Internal Affairs Lieutenant Naomi Price. She pulled the full file right away: body camera video, civilian videos, dispatch audio, the written report, witness statements, fire rescue statements, use of force paperwork. Then she compared everything. That is where Holloway started sinking. His report described Cole like a disruptive civilian, creating problems at an active scene. The video showed the opposite. Cole was already treating the victim before Holloway arrived. He kept the bystanders organized. He identified himself as a medic more than once. He stayed focused on the victim the whole time. Holloway arrived and turned it into a control issue. The body camera hurt him badly. It showed Cole explaining why he could not stop treatment in that moment. It showed Holloway ignoring that explanation. It showed Holloway escalating fast instead of assessing the situation first. The civilian videos made it worse. One angle showed Cole working before the patrol car even stopped. Another showed bystanders telling Holloway that Cole was helping. Another caught the moment Holloway pulled him away from the victim. Taken together, the footage removed doubt. This was not confusion. It was bad judgment followed by force. Then the medical responders gave statements. Fire Captain Elena Ruiz stated that Cole had clearly been providing competent emergency care before fire rescue arrived. She said the scene showed organized treatment, not interference. Paramedic Josh Levin confirmed the same thing. He stated that Cole's actions were medically appropriate and that removing him when Holloway did created unnecessary risk for the victim. That changed the case. Now the issue is not just an aggressive arrest. Holloway had interrupted active care without a valid reason. Price then verified Cole's background: active duty, advanced medical training, clean military record, no conduct problem, no credibility issue. Nothing in his history helped Holloway. After that, Price reviewed department policy. She found several violations. Holloway failed to properly assess the scene before acting. He interfered with emergency aid. He used force on a nonviolent person. He failed to de-escalate. He made a detention that the evidence did not support. Then he wrote a report that did not match the video. That last part mattered a lot. Departments can sometimes explain bad judgment. They have a much harder time explaining video that contradicts an officer's report. The bystanders helped close the gap. Their statements matched on the key points. Cole arrived first. Cole gave aid. Cole identified himself. Holloway escalated. Holloway ignored the medical emergency and focused on control. Price also found that Holloway had prior complaints tied to attitude and escalation. Nothing as large as this case, but enough to show a pattern. He had been warned before about pushing situations too far. At first, the department placed him on administrative leave. That did not last. Once command staff reviewed the footage and responder statements, the case moved fast. The risk to the department was obvious. The facts were too clear. The videos were too public. The medical testimony was too strong. The recommendation changed from review to termination. That happened quicker than usual because there was no real defense left. Holloway did not make a hard decision in a chaotic moment. He made a bad decision, doubled down, used force, and then wrote it up in a way the evidence did not support. Darius Cole did not need to say much. He let the footage speak. He let the medical responders speak. He let Holloway's own body camera do the damage. By the second week, the department was no longer deciding whether Holloway had crossed the line. It was deciding how to cut him loose. The department fired Patrolman Brent Holloway before the month ended. The findings were clear. He interfered with emergency medical care, used force without proper cause, failed to de-escalate, and wrote a report that did not match the video. Then, the state took the next step. Holloway lost his law enforcement certification. That ended his career for good. He was not moving to another department. He was done. Darius Cole was fully cleared. The investigation confirmed he had done exactly what a trained medic should do. He stopped, treated the victim, identified himself, and stayed focused on her condition the entire time. Fire Captain Elena Ruiz and paramedic Josh Levin confirmed that his care was appropriate and that Holloway created unnecessary risk by pulling him away. After that, Cole filed a civil suit. The claims included unlawful detention, excessive force, civil rights violations, and obstruction of emergency aid. The case was not just about a bad arrest. It was about an officer using his authority to stop life-saving care for no valid reason. Lindsay Mercer survived. That helped. It did not excuse what Holloway did. Cole stayed on active duty and returned to service with his record intact. Holloway lost his badge, his certification, and his future in law enforcement. The case also forced changes. The department updated training for officers arriving first at medical scenes. The focus was simple. Assess first. Do not interfere with qualified medical aid unless there's a real safety threat. That is why this case hit so hard. Holloway thought he controlled the scene because he had the badge. He did not. The cameras, the witnesses, and the facts took control away from him. One bad arrest ended a career. What would you have done if you were standing there? Put it in the comments, share the story, and subscribe for more.
I asked you for ID.
And I asked for a legal reason.
You're acting suspicious.
Walking on the sidewalk?
Your attitude's not helping you.
Silence isn't a crime.
Turn around, hands behind your back.
You haven't told me what I did.
I'm not going back and forth with you.
That's
Turn
because
all
you
the way
don't
around.
have
This patrol officer thought he had an easy stop. Instead, he turned a routine sidewalk contact into a career-ending mistake. He pressed a quiet pedestrian with no solid legal basis, ignored his partner's warning signs, and put handcuffs on a man he had not even identified. What he did not know was that the man standing in front of him was a police commissioner, Adrian Cross. Tell me where you're watching from. If you like stories about abuse of authority, bodycam fallout, and real accountability, like the video and subscribe. This happened on a Thursday night just after 9:20 p.m. in a redeveloped downtown corridor lined with restaurants, office buildings, and city property. Officer Brandon Pike was in a marked unit with Officer Marissa Cole. They were assigned to high-visibility patrol in an area where command staff had been pushing for more proactive policing. More stops, more contacts, more officer presence. Pike noticed a man walking alone near a public plaza beside a city parking structure. Dark jacket, plain clothes, nothing in his hands. Normal pace. He was not matching a suspect description because there was no suspect description. Dispatch had not sent out a call about him. No one had flagged him. He was simply there, walking by himself. Pike decided to stop him anyway. Bodycam later showed Pike stepping out with the kind of tone officers use when they want control first and facts later. He immediately started questioning the man about where he was going and what he was doing in the area. The man stopped and turned towards him. He did not walk away. He did not raise his voice. He did not make sudden movements. He kept his hands visible and answered very little. That man was Commissioner Adrian Cross, though Pike did not know it. Cross had been appointed months earlier after the department took public heat over repeated complaints involving unlawful stops, aggressive detentions, and poor field supervision. He had spent most of his first year pushing retraining, stop documentation reforms, and tighter review of body cam footage. He knew what legal street stops looked like. He also knew this one was already going bad. Pike asked for identification. Cross did not hand it over. He also did not do anything Pike could honestly describe as threatening. He did not clench up, move in, curse, or posture. He stayed composed and gave Pike almost nothing. That was what got under Pike's skin. Some officers can handle a quiet citizen. Pike could not. He read silence as attitude. He treated the lack of cooperation like a personal challenge. The stop stopped being about public safety and started becoming about control. Cole picked up on it early. Her body cam mattered later because it showed she was tracking the same facts any trained officer should have been tracking. No report of a crime, no matching description, no visible threat, no movement suggesting a weapon, no behavior that clearly supported detention. Pike kept pushing. Dispatch checked in over the radio for status. Pike responded by calling it a suspicious person stop and describing the man as uncooperative. That wording would matter later because it made the encounter sound more justified than it was. Uncooperative became Pike's substitute for actual facts. Cross stayed calm. Then he asked the key question. He asked if he was being detained. That should have forced Pike to be clear. If the answer was no, the contact should have ended. If the answer was yes, Pike needed a lawful reason he could explain on camera. He did neither. He gave a vague answer and repeated the demand for ID. Cole tried to slow it down, not with an argument, just with the kind of quiet field cue partners use when they know a stop is getting shaky. Pike ignored her. A few people nearby started looking over. Pike noticed. His posture changed. He got stiffer, more performative. Once he felt observed, he stopped looking for a clean exit and started trying to win the encounter. Cross did not help him do that. He remained controlled and said very little. Pike had several chances to end the contact before it turned into misconduct. He passed every one of them. Then he escalated. He ordered Cross to turn around. Cole reacted right away. The body cam showed it. She knew this was moving into handcuffing without a clear crime, without a clear threat, and without basic identification even being established. Cross did not resist. He stayed still while Pike stepped behind him, took his wrists, and locked the cuffs on. That was the moment the stop went from questionable to indefensible. An unarmed man was now handcuffed on a public sidewalk. Pike had not identified a crime. He had not articulated a safety threat. He had not confirmed who the man was. He had built the entire stop on irritation, then turned that irritation into restraint. Cole then asked the question that showed how badly Pike had handled it. Did they even have ID yet? They did not. Pike had handcuffed first and planned to justify it after. Then he reached into Cross's pocket for the wallet. That was the moment his confidence started to disappear. Pike opened the wallet expecting a normal ID check. Instead, he found the department seal. He paused for a second, then pulled the card fully into view. Commissioner Adrian Cross. Name, photo, title, current credentials. That was the first moment the stop stopped belonging to him. Bodycam caught the change right away. Pike's posture dropped. His face changed. His voice lost the edge it had a few seconds earlier. Officers can fake confidence for a long time, but they usually cannot hide the exact second they realize they are exposed. Cole saw the ID too. She took half a step back and looked at Pike like she already knew this was over. Cross was still in cuffs. That detail mattered more than anything. Because by then the issue was not embarrassment. It was that Pike had already committed himself on camera. He had detained and handcuffed the police commissioner without a clear legal basis, without identifying a crime, and without getting control of his own decision-making at any point during the contact. Pike started trying to recover. He fumbled through the usual phrases. He acted like this was a misunderstanding, like the identification changed the problem. It did not. The problem was not who Cross was. The problem was what Pike had done before he knew. That is what made this so bad from a department standpoint. If Cross had been any ordinary resident, the stop still would have been a problem. The title just made it impossible to bury. Cole moved in first. She told Pike to take the cuffs off. Not later, not after more talking. Right then. Pike hesitated for a second. That second made him look even worse. He still had not fully let go of the idea that he could talk his way out of it. Then he finally uncuffed Cross and stepped back. Cross turned around, straightened his jacket, and took his wallet from Pike's hand. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a speech. He did what experienced command staff do when they know a scene is already documented and the damage is done. He kept his words short and precise. He told Pike that he had just detained a man without stating a lawful basis. He told him that silence was not a crime. He told him that the problem on that sidewalk was not confusion. It was judgment. That hit harder than yelling would have. Pike tried to explain. He talked about suspicious behavior. He talked about the non-compliance. He talked too much. None of it fixed the video. None of it fixed the timeline. The footage had already captured the sequence clearly. Pike made contact. He pushed for ID. He ignored weak grounds. He escalated. He cuffed first. He checked identity after. Cole stopped trying to protect him at that point. She started speaking in the clipped, careful way officers use when they know the conversation is no longer informal. She was protecting herself now, too. That happens fast in scenes like this. Once the legal risk becomes obvious, every officer on camera starts thinking about reports, interviews, and internal review. Cross then did something Pike had not even considered. He triggered a silent emergency alert from his department-issued device. He did not need to call dispatch in front of them. He did not need to announce who he wanted. The alert went straight where it needed to go. Command-level notification. Location attached. Pike did not understand what had happened at first. Cole did. Within minutes, radio traffic shifted. The tone changed. Dispatch got tighter, more direct. A supervisor was told to respond. Then another. Then command staff vehicles started moving. That is when Pike's situation went from bad stop to career event. Sergeant Nolan Mercer arrived first. He stepped out, took one look at Cross, then one look at Pike, and understood enough from the body language alone to know this was serious. Mercer did not start by asking Pike for his version. That tells you a lot. He asked Cross if he was all right. Cross answered briefly and told Mercer the stop needed to be treated as an unlawful detention review immediately. He said Bodycam needed to be preserved. Both units, full upload, no gaps, no informal report writing before command notification. Mercer agreed on the spot. Pike stood there silent for the first time all night. That silence looked very different on him. A second supervisor arrived. Then a black department SUV pulled up. Assistant Chief Dana Mercer stepped out with two command staff members behind her. Not rushing, not loud, just moving with the kind of direct focus that tells everyone on scene the issue has already gone above patrol level. By then, Pike had stopped trying to sound in control. Cross gave a short description of what happened. He kept it factual. Time, initial contact, demand for identification, vague detention language, handcuffing before confirming identity, no stated crime, no visible threat, no lawful basis explained. He did not need more than that. The footage would do the rest. Cole then gave her own short account. She did not try to cover for Pike. She confirmed she had concerns during the stop and had tried to slow it down. That statement mattered because it killed the idea that Pike had made a reasonable judgment call under pressure. His own partner had seen the problem while it was happening. Pike finally got asked for his explanation. He said Cross had been acting suspiciously. Mercer asked what specific crime he suspected. Pike did not have a clean answer. He said Cross was refusing to identify himself. Mercer asked what legal basis he had to require ID. Again, Pike had no clean answer. That is how careers come apart in real time, not with some dramatic speech. With simple questions an officer should be able to answer and cannot. Cross then made the point that everyone there understood. He said this was exactly what the public had been complaining about. Officers turning non-compliance into suspicion, turning irritation into force, treating constitutional limits like obstacles instead of rules. No one on scene argued with that. Pike was separated from Cole and told not to discuss the incident further. Standard move. His body cam was tagged for immediate retention. Same with Cole's. Dispatch logs were locked. Street camera footage from the plaza and parking structure was requested before anyone could claim the scene was unclear. Cross did not stay long after that. He did not need to. He had seen enough. Before leaving, he looked at Pike one last time and told him the badge did not give him authority to punish people for refusing to make his job easier. That was the line Pike was going to hear again and again later. In review, in interviews, in internal affairs summaries, maybe even in court filings. Then Cross got into the command vehicle and left. Pike did not go back to patrol. Sergeant Mercer took his unit key, removed him from the shift, and told him to report to administrative review first thing in the morning. No more field contact that night, no more traffic stops, no more chances to talk himself deeper into it. By midnight, command staff had already flagged the incident for internal affairs. By morning, the footage was being treated like evidence. And once that happens, the officer usually stops controlling the story. The next morning, this was already an internal affairs case. They pulled both body cams, dispatch audio, cruiser location data, and city camera footage from the plaza. The timeline was simple. Officer Ryan Mercer made the stop without clearly tying the man to a crime. He pushed for ID. He kept the detention vague. He ignored his partner's concern. He used cuffs before confirming identity. That gave investigators a clean sequence to work with. Command staff reviewed the footage that morning. Internal Affairs Captain Daniel Sloan was there. So was Assistant Chief Vanessa Holt, a department lawyer, and 2 training supervisors. They watched the full stop once, then they watched it again in sections. The first issue was the start of the contact. Mercer had no strong reason for the stop. There was no call about the man, no matching suspect description, no behavior showing a crime in progress. He treated presence as suspicion and silence as a problem. The next issue was the detention question. When Commissioner Julian Tate asked if he was being detained, Mercer had to be clear. Either yes with a legal basis or no. He did neither. He stayed vague and kept demanding ID. That hurt him badly in review. Then they got to the handcuffing. That was the worst part of the footage. Tate was standing still, hands visible, no threat, no move toward Mercer, no sign of a weapon. Nothing on camera supported cuffs as a safety measure. One training supervisor said Mercer had used restraints to control the stop, not to manage danger. That went into the review summary. Officer Nina Vale, Mercer's partner, was interviewed before lunch. She said she had concerns during the stop. She said she did not see a clear crime or a clear safety threat. She admitted she tried to slow Mercer down but did not step in hard enough before he put the cuffs on. That statement mattered. It showed the problem was visible in real time, not just obvious afterward. Mercer came in later with a union representative. He tried to defend the stop by saying Tate acted suspicious and refused to identify himself. Internal Affairs kept the questions narrow. Captain Sloan asked what crime Mercer suspected when he started the stop. Mercer did not give a clear answer. Sloan asked what law allowed him to force identification under those facts. Again, no clear answer. Then Sloan asked what specific behavior justified handcuffs. Mercer said noncompliance. That answer did not help him. Noncompliance alone was not enough on that video. Tate was calm, stationary, unarmed. Mercer had no clean safety basis. By the end of the interview, Mercer had no solid defense left. That same afternoon, the department suspended him without pay. His badge powers were pulled. His gun and department gear were taken. His system access was cut. He was ordered not to contact Vail and not to discuss the case with anyone involved. The city's legal side moved at the same time. Commissioner Tate did not wave it off. He filed notice for a civil rights claim based on unlawful detention, false arrest, and constitutional violations under color of law. That changed everything for City Hall. This was not just one officer making one bad stop. The department already had a history of complaints about street detentions. That gave Tate's legal team room to argue pattern, training failure, and weak supervision. The footage leaked before the week ended. Once people saw it, the reaction was immediate. The video was easy to follow. A quiet man was stopped, pressured, cuffed, and then suddenly treated differently when the officer found out who he was. That was the part people locked onto. Mercer had one tone for a man he thought was just another pedestrian. Then he found the department ID and changed his whole posture. That made the case worse in public and inside the department. Community groups started speaking out within days. Civil rights lawyers said the footage matched what many residents had described for years. Local organizers asked for a review of past suspicious person stops. Reporters started digging into older complaints and settlement records. The union tried to defend Mercer by saying officers make fast decisions in uncertain situations. That did not land. The stop was not fast. It was not chaotic. The problem was on camera from the beginning. By Monday, Internal Affairs finished its first formal findings. They sustained violations for unlawful detention, improper use of restraints, failure to state reasonable suspicion, failure to de-escalate, and conduct unbecoming. Mercer was given notice that termination was being recommended. Vail was not cleared either. She was ordered into disciplinary review for failure to intervene more directly. Not the same level as Mercer, but still serious. The department was sending a message that seeing a bad stop and doing too little was also a problem. City lawyers then started looking at money. Tate knew department policy. He knew stop law. He knew exactly how Mercer had failed and exactly how to describe that failure. That made him a strong plaintiff and made the case dangerous for the city. The pressure spread beyond this one incident. After the footage came out, more people started filing complaints and asking for old Bodycam and stop records. Some said they had been treated the same way and never filed before because they assumed nothing would happen. That is how the case widened. By the end of the week, Mercer was facing termination, the city was preparing for a civil rights lawsuit, and the department was dealing with a bigger problem than one officer. The video showed how an officer acted when he thought the person in front of him had no status, no leverage, and no one coming for him. The department did not drag this out. Within weeks, Officer Ryan Mercer was fired. The finding was straightforward. He made a stop without solid grounds, treated silence like suspicious behavior, used cuffs without a clear safety reason, and tried to justify it after the fact. The department also sent the case to the state certification board, which meant Mercer was now facing the real chance of losing his ability to work as a police officer anywhere in the state. That part mattered more than the firing. A lot of officers get terminated and try to land somewhere else. Decertification closes that door. Officer Nina Vail kept her job, but she took a hit too. She was formally disciplined for failing to intervene hard enough before the cuffs went on. She got pulled from patrol, sent back through stop and detention training, and lost standing inside the department. Command staff made it clear that seeing a bad stop and offering weak hints was not enough. Commissioner Julian Tate did not bury the case. He filed the civil rights lawsuit and let it move. That decision changed the pressure on the city. This was no longer just an internal discipline matter. It became a public test of whether the department would actually hold itself to the same standard it claimed to impose on the street. The city tried to settle fast. That was expected. The video was bad. The timeline was worse. Tate's lawyers had a simple case: unlawful detention, false arrest, civil rights violations, weak supervision, in a department that had already been warned about stop problems before. The settlement talks stayed quiet at first, but the political damage was public. City council hearings got packed. Civil rights groups demanded stop data. Local reporters pulled old complaint records and found that Mercer had been named before in aggressive stop allegations, even if those earlier cases had never turned into this kind of disaster. That was another problem for the city. A bad stop is one thing. A bad stop by an officer with prior warning signs is much worse. Tate used the case to force policy changes fast. He ordered a rewrite of field stop rules in plain language. Officers now had to state the legal basis for a detention clearly and early. They also had to document specific facts, not attitude, silence, or refusal to answer questions. He added a second rule. If an officer used handcuffs during a non-violent investigative detention, a supervisor had to be notified immediately, not at the end of the shift. Right then, he added a third one. Failure to intervene became a bigger discipline issue, not a side note, its own violation. Then came the change that got the most attention inside the department. Tate approved AI-assisted Bodycam review. It was not there to replace supervisors or make arrest decisions. It was there to scan for patterns. Fast escalation, repeated interruptions, vague detention language, quick shifts from questioning to commands, the kind of markers that show up again and again in bad stops. A lot of officers hated that idea. Tate did not care. His point was simple. Supervisors had been saying for years that there was too much footage to review closely. That excuse was gone now. The public reaction stayed strong for months because the case was easy to understand. People were not trying to decode a chaotic fight or a split-second shooting. They saw a calm man stopped on a sidewalk, pressured for ID, put in cuffs, and then treated completely differently once the officer learned who he was. That was the whole story. Mercer did not respect the law. He respected rank. That is what damaged trust most. Community groups used the case to push for a stronger civilian oversight board. City leaders approved expanded review authority not long after. The board got better access to stop data, complaint trends, and Bodycam audit results. Not full control of discipline, but more visibility and more leverage than it had before. Tate also ordered an audit of suspicious person stops from the previous 18 months. That review found repeated use of vague language in reports, especially words like evasive, uncooperative, and suspicious, with little factual detail behind them. More officers ended up in retraining. A few ended up under formal review. So one stop changed more than Mercer's future. It changed reporting. It changed supervision. It changed how the department reviewed Bodycam. It changed how much room officers had to hide weak detentions behind loose wording. As for Mercer, his name became a warning inside the department. Not because he stopped the wrong man, because he showed exactly how he treated a man he thought had no power. That was the lesson Commissioner Tate kept repeating after the case. Rights do not depend on status. A stop does not become lawful because an officer feels challenged, and silence is not a crime just because it annoys the person with the badge. That is the whole reason this story hits so hard. If Tate had identified himself in the first 10 seconds, Mercer probably would have changed his tone, backed off, and gone home thinking nothing happened. Instead, he exposed himself on Bodycam in public, in a way no report could clean up later. And that is how one patrol officer turned his own ego into evidence. Let me know what you would have done if you were standing there watching that stop. And if you have ever seen a cop push a weak stop just because somebody did not act submissive enough, say so in the comments. Subscribe for more stories like this.
What are you doing in here? Shopping.
Try again.
I'm here on official business and I'm not a threat to this store.
Then maybe you should have thought about that before acting shady.
Acting shady?
People said you were watching customers.
I'm observant. That's not a crime.
ID, right now.
I'll show you credentials, but you need to stop doing this in front of everyone.
Then why do you sound nervous?
Because you walked in here acting like you already picked the bad guy.
A patrol officer with a bad attitude thought he was putting a regular shopper in his place at a grocery store. He had no idea he was threatening an undercover Secret Service agent in the middle of an active assignment. That decision didn't end with a warning or an awkward apology. It turned into a $5 million lawsuit that wrecked his job and dragged his whole department into public embarrassment. Tell me where you're watching from. State, city, country, wherever. And if you watch stories about abuse of power, accountability, and officials ruining themselves with their own ego, like the video and subscribe. This started when the situation was already going wrong. Officer Kyle Dugan had walked a calm scene and made it hostile in less than a minute. He stood too close, spoke too loud, and acted like he was dealing with a threat instead of a man buying a few items after work. The man he targeted didn't react the way Dugan wanted. He stayed composed. He answered carefully. He didn't flinch, panic, or start begging to be left alone. Dugan took that personally. The shopper was Brent Cole. Brent was 42 and worked for the Secret Service. Not in uniform, not in a visible role. He was on protective intelligence duty, connected to a federal visit planned for the next day. His job that week was simple on paper and serious in practice. Stay unnoticed, watch patterns, flag problems early. Don't attract attention unless there's no other choice. That afternoon, he stopped at a grocery store near the hotel corridor tied to the event route. It was an ordinary stop. Water, coffee, a few snacks, then back out. Nothing dramatic happened until someone decided he looked wrong for the space. Brent had spent years training himself to notice details. Entrances, exits, loitering, changes in behavior. Anybody in that line of work does it automatically. In the wrong setting, that kind of awareness gets misread fast. One customer noticed him scanning the front of the store more than once. Another mentioned that he seemed watchful. By the time the store called local police, the report had already turned into the usual nonsense. A suspicious man, hanging around, watching people, maybe casing the place. No theft, no threats, no disturbance. Just a vague complaint dressed up like public safety. Dugan arrived ready to dominate the scene, not understand it. He came through the front entrance with the kind of body language that says he had already picked the bad guy. The store manager, Nina Patel, pointed out Brent near self-checkout. He had a basket in hand and hadn't raised his voice once. Dugan didn't start with basic questions. He went straight into commands and demands. He wanted Brent to explain why he was there, why he had been watching customers, why he seemed nervous, why he wasn't answering fast enough. Brent answered in a controlled way. He said he was working in an official capacity and that there was no threat to the store. He kept it narrow because that's what trained people do. They don't expose an assignment in public to satisfy a local officer's mood. He also knew a smart officer would hear that answer, lower the temperature, and move the conversation somewhere private. Dugan did the opposite. He pushed harder. He wanted a full explanation in the middle of the store. He treated caution like disrespect. That's where this case really began. Not with a safety concern, with ego. Dugan didn't like that Brent stayed calm and didn't hand him instant submission. Nina Patel saw it too. She stepped in and told Dugan the customer hadn't caused a problem. He hadn't argued with staff. He hadn't stolen anything. He hadn't threatened anyone. Dugan brushed that off like it didn't matter. That detail came back to hurt him later because it showed he wasn't missing facts. He was ignoring them. Brent then gave him a clean way out. He said he was federal law enforcement and could identify himself privately. That should have ended the stop. A competent officer would have moved the contact away from the crowd, verified credentials, and closed it out. Dugan heard the word federal and got more aggressive. He acted like Brent had challenged him instead of trying to resolve the encounter. That shift matters. Once Dugan decided this was about his authority, facts stopped helping. He told Brent to come outside. Brent went with him because making a scene inside a crowded grocery store was the last thing he wanted. A few customers were already watching. One had started recording near the entrance. Nina stayed close enough to see what happened next. Outside, Dugan got sharper and louder. He stood near his patrol unit and pressed Brent again for answers. Brent moved carefully, told him he had official credentials, and presented them in a controlled way. He didn't flash them around. He didn't make a speech. He gave Dugan another chance to do his job properly. Dugan looked at the credentials and rejected them almost immediately. That was the moment everything got expensive. He didn't inspect them like a professional. He dismissed them like a man who had already gone too far to admit he was wrong. He treated real federal identification as fake and started talking like Brent was trying to bluff his way out of trouble. Brent told him calmly that the credentials were legitimate and could be verified. Dugan didn't slow down. He escalated. That's the problem with officers like this. They think confidence equals accuracy. It doesn't. It just makes the mistake louder. Brent kept giving him options. Verify the ID, call a supervisor, contact the number attached to the credentials. Dugan ignored all of it. He reframed the whole encounter around control. In his head, Brent wasn't a federal agent trying to handle the contact professionally. He was a man who needed to be put in place. By then, Dugan had moved past investigation. He was trying to win. People inside the store could see enough through the front windows to know this wasn't normal. The customer recording stayed fixed on the parking lot. Nina watched Dugan's posture change from aggressive to openly confrontational. Brent knew what was coming before anyone else there did. He had seen that pattern before. An insecure officer gets challenged in public, then doubles down because backing off feels worse than being wrong. Dugan made the worst choice available to him. He put his hands on an undercover Secret Service agent and started an unlawful detention. Once Dugan put his hands on Brent, the whole thing moved from bad judgment to a legal problem. He turned Brent towards the patrol unit and told him he was being detained while he sorted out the fake ID issue. That claim had no real basis. Dugan had no evidence the credentials were fake. He had no report of a crime. He had no witness saying Brent had threatened anyone or tried to access a restricted area. He just had his own opinion, and he treated that like probable cause. Brent didn't fight him. He didn't pull away. He told Dugan again that the credentials were real, that this could be verified quickly, and that Dugan needed to slow down. Dugan heard all of that and kept going. He put Brent in handcuffs anyway. That was the first clear Fourth Amendment problem. A detention like that needs facts. Dugan had none worth standing on. Then he made it worse. He searched Brent after cuffing him. Pockets, waistband area, jacket, bag. He said it was for officer safety and investigation. Officers say that all the time when they need cover for a search. They can't justify cleanly. In this case, it looked even worse because Brent had already presented government credentials and had not made a single threatening move. Dugan found a second credential wallet, a government phone, and assignment-related items that should have told any reasonable officer to stop and verify before doing anything else. Instead, Dugan treated every official-looking item as proof that Brent was running a scam. That's how deep he was into his own story. He wasn't reading the facts anymore. He was forcing the facts to fit his ego. Brent stayed measured. That helped him later. He told Dugan the detention was unlawful. He told him the credentials would check out. He told him there were federal supervisors who could confirm his status immediately. Dugan answered the way officers answer when they've decided disrespect is the real offense. He acted like every calm correction was one more reason to tighten control. That part matters because juries and investigators look closely at tone. Dugan wasn't confused. He was offended. Nina Patel had stepped farther outside by then. She still wasn't interfering. She was watching. A customer near the entrance was still recording. Another shopper had started recording from farther out in the lot. Dugan either didn't notice or didn't care. Some officers think Bodycam solves everything for them. It doesn't. It records the mistake, too. Brent then gave Dugan one more practical option. He told him there were direct numbers tied to the credentials, and that Dugan could contact federal supervisors instead of treating the situation like a street arrest. Dugan ignored that and started building a local case that made no sense. He talked about impersonation, obstruction, evasion. None of it fit what had actually happened. That's what happens when an officer starts with the conclusion and works backward. Backup arrived a few minutes later. Officer Lena Brooks came in first. She stepped out and looked at Brent in cuffs, looked at Dugan, then looked at the credentials Dugan had set on the hood of the patrol car. Her reaction was different right away. Not because she was smarter than everyone else, because she was still using her head. She asked Dugan what the underlying offense was. Dugan gave her a rushed version heavy on attitude and light on facts. Suspicious behavior, refusal to cooperate, possible fake federal ID. Brooks didn't look convinced. She picked up one of the credentials, examined it longer than Dugan had, and asked whether dispatch had run any verification. Dugan said he was handling it. That answer was another problem. He wasn't handling it. He was avoiding verification because verification could end his authority over the scene. Brent saw Brooks was more careful and directed his comments toward process. He identified himself again, told her he was on federal assignment, and said a supervisor or duty contact could confirm it immediately. He didn't plead, he didn't posture, he stayed factual. That also mattered later. He gave the department every chance to fix the mistake before it got bigger. Dugan didn't like Brooks slowing things down. He cut in, took control of the conversation again, and told her he believed Brent was bluffing. He had convinced himself that backing off now would make him look weak in front of another officer. That's the part that destroys the departments. Once the scene becomes about saving face, policy stops meaning much. Brooks finally pushed the issue and asked dispatch to run the credential information and contact numbers. Dugan should have done that before the cuffs went on. Instead, it happened after the detention and search were already underway. The response didn't come back instantly, but it came back fast enough to change the whole scene. Dispatch reported that one of the listed contact points connected to a valid federal office. Then the tone on the radio shifted. Shorter responses, more careful language. Somebody at the other end understood very quickly that local police might have a serious problem sitting in a grocery store parking lot. That's when Sergeant Dana Flores arrived. Flores had enough experience to read a scene in seconds. One man cuffed, no sign of struggle, no agitated crowd, no stolen property, no obvious crime. Two sets of federal-looking credentials on the hood. Dugan standing rigid and over-explaining before she even asked a full question. Officers who know what they're doing recognize that pattern fast. It usually means the officer who made the stop already knows he may have pushed too far. Flores separated the officers and got the facts in pieces. Dugan's version was still built around his personal belief that Brent had to be lying. Brooks gave a cleaner account and made it clear the credentials appeared legitimate enough to require formal verification before any detention should have happened. Nina Patel then told Flores that Brent had been calm the entire time and that Dugan had ignored her when she tried to explain there had been no disturbance in the store. That tightened the scene immediately. Flores took a closer look at the credentials and contacted the number herself. This time, the answer left very little room for fantasy. The office on the other end confirmed that Brent Cole was a Secret Service agent attached to a protective intelligence operation in the area. They also asked who had detained him and why. That was the moment the ground dropped out from under Dugan. His posture changed first. Officers always tell on themselves there. He stopped projecting control and started trying to explain himself. Not to Brent, not to the public, to his supervisor. That told the real story. His confidence had never been about certainty. It had been about dominance. And now that a higher authority had entered the picture, it disappeared. Flores ordered the handcuffs removed. Brent was uncuffed in the same parking lot where Dugan had tried to make an example out of him. Nobody on scene said much because there wasn't much to say. The damage had already been done. Brent had been detained without probable cause, searched without a lawful basis, and treated like a criminal after presenting valid federal credentials, on camera, in public, in front of witnesses. Dugan tried to shift into apology mode, but that never works when the facts are this bad. An apology doesn't erase an unlawful detention. It definitely doesn't erase a search. Brent adjusted his jacket, collected himself, and stayed professional. That probably saved the city from an even uglier scene right there. Then he made it clear that the issue was no longer just local. Federal supervisors would be contacted, reports would be preserved, video would matter. Every decision from the first contact forward would be reviewed. At that point, the local department stopped dealing with a grocery store call. It was dealing with exposure. After Brent was released, the issue moved out of the parking lot and into legal review. He didn't argue. He documented everything. Time of the stop. When Dugan first made contact. When the credentials were shown. When the cuffs went on. When the search happened. When the supervisor finally verified who he was. His own supervisors were notified the same day, so the local department already knew this would not stay internal. By that evening, the evidence trail was locked in. Bodycam footage was flagged. Dispatch audio was preserved. Store cameras were pulled. 2 customer videos were already moving around locally. That created a problem for the department fast, because the public could now see the basic facts without waiting for a press release. The first public line from the department framed it as a misunderstanding during a suspicious person investigation. That position didn't last. The footage showed Brent staying calm. It showed Dugan pushing the encounter forward without a clear legal basis. It showed several chances to verify the credentials before using force. He ignored all of them. Brent gave a formal statement through counsel and through his agency. He kept it factual. He stated that Dugan detained him without probable cause, searched him without lawful grounds, and rejected valid federal identification before making any serious effort to confirm it. The video supported that version closely. Then Dugan's history became relevant. Internal reviewers found prior complaints tied to escalation and poor judgment during citizen contacts. Some had been closed with little action. One earlier incident had already drawn a warning about stretching weak suspicion too far. On their own, those records might not have done much. In this case, they made the department look careless. It suggested Dugan had been showing the same pattern for a while, and nobody had stopped him. Internal Affairs opened a full investigation. Command staff did not have room to avoid it. A federal agency was now involved. Civil rights lawyers were watching. Local media had started asking for records. Once investigators lined up Dugan's report against Bodycam, dispatch logs, witness statements, and store video, the weaknesses were obvious. He inflated the suspicion. He described Brent as less cooperative than the footage showed. He tried to justify the detention after the fact. That is where officers usually lose credibility for good. Not only in the moment, on paper too. Brent then filed suit against Dugan and the department. The claims included unlawful detention, unlawful search, battery, civil rights violations, and emotional distress. The strength of the case was not flashy. It was simple. Dugan got a vague call. He approached aggressively. He was told Brent was federal law enforcement. He was shown credentials. He dismissed them. He detained and searched Brent anyway. Only later did a supervisor confirm that Brent had told the truth from the start. That sequence was enough to put the city in serious danger. The city's lawyers understood it early. A jury would not need much help with this one. A calm man identified himself, showed proof, and still got cuffed because an officer decided he had to be lying. Add body cam and witness video, and the city was staring at a very public loss. Discovery made the case worse for the department. Dugan's prior complaints came into play. Training records were reviewed. Supervisors were questioned about whether they had done enough after earlier warnings. The policy manual looked fine on paper. Actual enforcement looked weak. That gap matters in civil cases. Cities pay heavily when bad habits stay on the street long after supervisors should have acted. The Secret Service did not turn it into a public spectacle, but its involvement changed the pressure. Local agencies rely on trust with federal partners. This stop damaged that trust immediately, quietly at first, then across the whole chain. Dugan was placed on leave. That was just the first step. He later tried to defend himself as an officer making a hard call in an uncertain situation. That argument kept falling apart under review. The uncertainty came from his own refusal to verify what was right in front of him. Public reaction moved faster than the internal process. News coverage picked up the case. Civil rights attorneys pointed to the Fourth Amendment issues. Former officers said the same thing in plainer terms. Dugan turned a routine contact into a personal contest, and the city was going to pay for it. That is exactly what happened. Settlement talks became serious once the city saw how exposed it was. Brent had strong evidence, credible witnesses, a clean record, and federal backing. The city had video, prior complaints, and an officer whose judgment looked worse every time the timeline was reviewed. The case ended in a $5 million settlement paid by local taxpayers. Now the department still had to deal with Dugan himself. The lawsuit ended, but Dugan's career didn't survive it. Internal Affairs found that he made an unlawful detention, carried out an unjustified search, ignored valid credentials, and wrote the incident in a way the video did not support. He was fired. Then the state certification board reviewed the case. Dugan lost his certification, which meant he could not work as a police officer again. The department had problems too. Supervisors had to answer for earlier complaints against him and for letting his pattern continue. The city also had to explain why taxpayers were paying $5 million for one officer's ego. Brent did not go on a media tour. He went back to work. That helped him. He looked professional from start to finish, and the evidence backed him up completely. The case also forced changes. The department updated procedures for identity verification, detention decisions, and supervisor response when someone claims federal status. Local and federal coordination tightened after that. That is why this case mattered. Dugan thought he was asserting authority over a man in a parking lot. Instead, he turned a routine contact into a civil rights case, lost his job, lost his certification, and cost the city millions. The lesson is simple. Ego can destroy a cop's career faster than any suspect ever will. What would you have done if you saw this happen? Put it in the comments, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more.
Stand up and keep your hands where I can see them.
What is this about?
Complaint of disorderly behavior. Stand up.
Who made the complaint?
That's not your concern right now. Stand up.
So, you want to detain me?
Yes, while I figure this out.
Figure out what?
Ma'am, this can go easy if you just cooperate.
Easy for who?
Enough. Stand up. I work for the federal.
What happens when street cops try to embarrass the exact kind of person who knows every rule they're supposed to follow? This was the kind of stop that looked bad in real time and somehow got worse every minute after that. Two patrol officers walked into a downtown lunch spot, picked the wrong woman, turned a weak call into a public arrest, and spent the next 10 minutes building the lawsuit that would gut their careers. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you like stories where power trips crash into facts, hit like and subscribe, because this one went all the way from a lunch table to a $20 million settlement. The woman at the center of it was Dana Mercer, 41, federal prosecutor, calm voice, sharp memory, zero interest in performing fear for men who confused a badge with unlimited authority. She wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, didn't need to be. By the time those officers put hands on her, they were already in deeper trouble than they understood. It started in a business district restaurant a few blocks from the federal courthouse. Lunch rush, lawyers, staffers, consultants, people on tight schedules, eating fast and checking phones. Normal place. Polished, expensive. quiet enough that everybody noticed when police energy entered the room. Dana had taken a corner table on the patio. She was between hearings. Her briefcase was open beside her chair. A legal pad sat next to her plate. She'd been reviewing notes and answering a work call. That was it. No scene, no disturbance, no threat. Just a black woman in a suit speaking firmly into a phone and flipping through case papers in a place where half the room probably did the same thing every day. Somebody called it in anyway. Not because of a crime. Because she looks suspicious to the kind of person who sees confidence and starts inventing danger around it. Dispatch sent the call as a possible disturbance involving a woman refusing to leave. That was the first problem. The restaurant manager hadn't asked Donna to leave. No employee had reported a conflict. Nobody said she threatened anyone. By the time officers Brett Harlan and Luis Kessler arrived, they weren't responding to facts. They were responding to a vibe. And officers who start with vibes usually end with paperwork they can't defend. Harlan went first. That fit his pattern. He liked taking over scenes fast, talking hard, making people react to him. He stepped onto the patio and locked onto Dana, like he'd already chosen the ending. Kessler stayed half a step behind, doing what weak partners do in moments like that. Watching a bad decision form and deciding not to interrupt it. Harlan told Dana to stand up and keep her hands visible. She looked at him, stayed seated, and asked what this was about. That should have slowed everything down. A competent officer would have explained the complaint, checked with staff, figured out whether there was even a lawful basis to detain her. That didn't happen. Harlan treated the question itself like disrespect. He told her again to stand up. He added that she was being detained while they investigated. Investigated what? That was the obvious question. Dana asked it. He didn't answer it cleanly because he didn't have a clean answer. He mentioned a complaint. He mentioned disorderly behavior. Then he told her to produce identification. Now the whole patio was watching. Dana didn't refuse in the dramatic way officers later claimed in their reports. She did something worse for them. She stayed controlled. She asked whether she was free to leave. She asked what specific crime he believed had occurred. She told him her identification was in her bag and said she was not consenting to any search of it without a lawful basis. That was when Harlan made the stop personal. He leaned in, changed his tone, made it clear this wasn't about solving anything. He wanted submission. Quick, public, obvious. He wanted her on her feet, compliant, smaller than him in front of a room full of strangers. Dana didn't give him that, and officers like Harlan always take that badly. Kessler tried a softer version of the same thing. He told her this could all be easy if she just cooperated. That line shows up in a lot of bad police encounters. It sounds reasonable. It isn't. What it really means is stop asking for your rights and let us control the scene. Dana told him again that she was willing to identify herself, but she wanted to know the legal basis for the detention first. Perfectly fair. Actually smarter than most people manage under pressure. She also told him she worked for the federal government. Harlan smirked at that. Big mistake. He told her everybody claimed to be important when police showed up. He said titles didn't matter on his scene. That little phrase came back later like a hammer, because now he'd said the quiet part out loud. He wasn't checking facts. He was punishing resistance. The restaurant manager, Maya Chen, came out by then. She tried to explain that Dana had done nothing wrong and that nobody from the restaurant had asked for police intervention. Harlan cut her off. Bad move again. He didn't want information. He wanted control of the narrative before facts could ruin it. One customer had already started recording, then another, then another. You could feel the whole thing shift. People stopped pretending this was normal. They could see the officers weren't calming a problem. They were creating one. Dana reached slowly toward her bag and said she was retrieving identification. Harlan grabbed her wrist. That was the moment the stop crossed into a real legal disaster. He later claimed officer safety. Officers always run to that when the video looks ugly. but body cam and witness footage told a cleaner story. She'd moved slowly. She'd announced what she was doing. She was seated. No threat indicators, no weapon claim, no aggressive movement. He just didn't like that she was still acting like an equal participant in the encounter instead of a subject. Dana pulled her arm back and told him not to touch her without cause. Harlan took that as resistance, or pretended to. Hard to tell with men like that. Sometimes they know exactly what they're doing. Sometimes ego blinds them so fast they start believing their own misconduct in real time. He ordered her up from the chair. Kessler moved in. Between them, they pulled her to her feet while she kept saying she was not resisting and wanted a supervisor. People on the patio started objecting. Maya said again there had been no disturbance. One man identified himself as an attorney and told the officers they were making a mistake. Harlan snapped at him to stay out of it. That's another thing officers with fragile authority never understand. Public scenes don't stay private just because they want them to. Once you start dragging a professional woman out of a chair in the middle of lunch, everybody becomes a witness. They turned her, cuffed her, and walked her through the restaurant. That part did the damage nobody at City Hall could later undo. A federal prosecutor, in handcuffs, in front of courthouse staff, private attorneys, restaurant employees, and a row of raised phones. Humiliation like that doesn't disappear because a department writes a defensive report later. It settles into memory, into video, into civil claims, into juries. Outside, Harlan searched her bag. No warrant, no consent, no actual foundation strong enough to survive serious review. He found the identification almost immediately. Federal credentials, not a bluff, not a game. The exact thing she'd been telling them from the start. Kessler saw it first, and that was the first crack. His posture changed. Small but visible. He looked at Harlan, then at the credential, then back at Dana, like his brain had finally caught up to the scene. This wasn't some vague street stop with no consequences. They had just handcuffed a federal prosecutor after ignoring staff, ignoring witnesses, ignoring her explanation, and putting their hands on her without a clean legal basis. A smart officer would have ended it right there. Uncuff. Apologize. Call a supervisor. Start damage control. Harlan wasn't smart in the moments that mattered. He doubled down. He said credentials could be fake. Said they were taking her in until everything checked out. That was pure ego. Desperate ego. The kind that turns one bad choice into 5 because the man making them cannot stand the idea of backing up in front of a crowd. By the time Sergeant Nolan Pike arrived, the body cams had already captured enough to sink half a defense. Pike got a fast version from Harlan, not an honest one. Complaint, non-compliance, possible interference, suspicious behavior. The usual pile of vague words officers use when the actual facts don't help them. Dana, still cuffed, gave Pike the simple version. She'd been eating lunch. She'd asked for the basis of the stop. She'd offered identification from her bag. Harlan grabbed her, cuffed her, searched the bag, and ignored her federal credentials when he found them. Pike had a choice right there. Be a supervisor, or be a shield. He chose shield. He told the officers to transport her. Again, bad move. Huge one? Because now this wasn't one patrol officer losing control. This was a chain of command failure. One ego had become 3. And here was the part none of them understood yet. Dana Mercer didn't need to win the argument on the sidewalk. That part was over. She just needed them to keep making decisions on camera. Every extra minute helped her. Every order. Every contradiction. Every witness they brushed aside. They thought they were tightening control. Really, they were writing exhibits. As they put her in the back of the cruiser, Dana stopped trying to convince them. That phase had passed. She shifted to memory, names, badge numbers, sequence, exact language. Timestamps, who interrupted whom, who searched what. who ignored the restaurant manager, who saw the credentials and kept going. That's what made the whole thing deadly for the department later. She wasn't panicking. She was preserving. By the time the cruiser pulled away from the restaurant, Maya had already saved the security footage. 2 attorneys had exchanged numbers with witnesses. One courthouse employee had recognized Dana and started making calls. Inside the car, Kessler sat in silence. Harlan kept performing certainty. Pike told dispatch they were bringing in a detainee for identification verification. A detainee, not an arrestee, not a suspect tied to a clear offense, just a person they'd humiliated in public because none of them had the discipline to stop. In downtown, a few blocks from the federal courthouse, the first calls were already reaching people with enough authority to make this a career-ending afternoon. The ride to the precinct was the last stretch where those officers still thought they could control the story. That ended the second Dana got through booking. The desk staff recognized the name before Harlan could finish dressing up the arrest. Not because federal prosecutors were celebrities, because downtown systems overlap. Courthouse people know each other. Agency names travel fast. Credentials matter. And once one booking officer saw who she was, the room changed, not in a dramatic movie way, in the real way. People got quieter. Screens got checked twice. Somebody stopped treating the paperwork like routine. Somebody else made a call they probably wished they didn't have to make. Harlan kept pushing the same version. Disorderly conduct. Failure to comply. Suspicious behavior. Interference with an investigation. That stack of vague garbage had carried him through plenty of street stops before. It didn't work here because Dana knew exactly how weak each label was. She didn't argue like a civilian trying to get out of trouble. She corrected the record like a lawyer building one. She stated the timeline. She identified the lack of probable cause. She flagged the unlawful bag search. She pointed out that the restaurant manager had contradicted the call basis on scene. She noted that the officers found valid federal credentials and kept her in cuffs anyway. Then she asked for their names again, the supervisor's name again, and the Bodycam preservation process. That last part hit hard. Now, the booking people knew what kind of problem had landed on their desk. This wasn't a messy arrest they could clean up with a disorderly citation and a shrug. This was a constitutional claim with witnesses, surveillance, and a plaintiff who understood discovery better than the city attorneys who would later inherit it. Within 30 minutes, phone traffic started moving above the station level. A supervisor from Dana's office called, then another. Then someone from Federal Protective Services started asking why a federal prosecutor had been cuffed on a lunch break over a call nobody could clearly explain. That's when the panic started breaking through the swagger. Kessler felt it first. He stopped talking much, stopped making eye contact, stopped acting like the stop had been clean. People like him always collapse inward when the cover story starts slipping. He'd gone along with Harlan on the sidewalk because that was easy. At the station with forms, names, and internal recordings in play, it didn't feel easy anymore. Harlan went the other way. He got louder, more rigid, more convinced that forceful repetition could turn weak facts into strong ones. It couldn't. It just made him look worse. Pike tried to split the difference. He started talking about mistaken identity and officer caution. That didn't help either. The officers hadn't made a reasonable mistake and then corrected it. They'd ignored correction after correction. That's what killed them later. One bad assumption can sometimes survive review. Doubling down after the facts arrive usually can't. Dana was released that evening. No charges, no coherent explanation, no real apology. Just a rushed exit built around damage control. That made things worse. Always does. Because when a department cuffs someone in public, drags them through booking, then quietly lets them go with nothing, it confirms exactly what the plaintiff's lawyer wants a jury to hear. They had power. They used it badly, then they ran out of nerve. Dana didn't go home and try to forget it. She got organized. By that night, the preservation letters were drafted: restaurant footage, body cam files, dash cam, dispatch audio, CAD logs, booking video, internal radio traffic, incident reports, supplemental reports, complaint history, training records, supervisory review trail. She and the lawyers who circled around her moved fast, because experienced people know departments lose memory when evidence gets expensive. The next morning, the first local story hit. A federal prosecutor had been arrested at lunch after questioning officers about the legal basis for her detention. Witnesses said the restaurant had never asked police to remove her. Video showed officers searching her bag, finding credentials, and still hauling her away. That story exploded because it had everything: public humiliation, weak police logic, clean video, a powerful profession on the receiving end of street-level arrogance. And underneath all that, the question every normal person asks in a case like this: if they did this to someone who knew the law cold, what did they do to everybody else? Then other names started surfacing. A civil rights group dug into complaint records and found Harlan had already collected a reputation inside the department. Not enough to end his career. Enough to show a pattern: aggressive stops, shaky justifications, citizen complaints that went nowhere, supervisors smoothing rough edges instead of addressing the core problem. Same old story. A guy keeps pushing because the system keeps teaching him he can. That turned Dana's case from a bad arrest into a city problem. The lawsuit landed 6 months later, and it was brutal. Not loud, not theatrical, just precise. False arrest, unlawful detention, unlawful search, retaliatory escalation, failure to intervene, supervisory liability, municipal liability tied to ignored warning signs, state law claims on top, emotional distress, reputational harm, professional harm, violation after violation lined up in order. The city tried the usual first move. It asked for patience, promised review, and acted like facts were still developing. That posture lasted until discovery started. Then the wheels came off. Maya Chen gave a clean statement and never wavered. She said Dana had been calm, said the restaurant had not called for removal, said she personally told officers there was no disturbance. That alone hurt them. Then the witness videos came in. Same problem. Dana stayed seated, announced her movement toward the bag, asked basic legal questions. Harlan escalated anyway. Then came the body cams. That was the funeral. Not because body cam always tells the whole truth. It doesn't. Angles miss things. Audio drops. Officers forget to position themselves honestly. But in this case, the recordings were bad enough. You could hear the impatience. You could hear the dismissal when Dana identified herself. You could hear the shift from investigation to punishment. At one point, Harlan practically admitted the stop had become a contest over compliance. That line got replayed in depositions until even the city's lawyers stopped pretending it had an innocent meaning. Kessler sank during deposition. He tried to say Dana made sudden movements. Video undercut that. He tried to say they feared for safety. The scene undercut that. He tried to say they only learned her identity later. The bag search undercut that. Then the lawyers walked him through timestamps, frame by frame. By the end, he looked like what he was, a man who tied himself to a bad officer and discovered too late that loyalty is expensive when the video works. Pike did no better. He claimed he relied on his officers. Fair enough up to a point. Then the plaintiff's team asked why he transported anyway, after hearing the restaurant manager contradict the call basis, and after learning valid federal credentials had already been found. He had no good answer. Supervisors hate that moment. Rank stops helping. It becomes obvious they weren't managing risk. They were protecting their own. The city attorney's office changed tone after that. Quietly at first, then completely. Because by then they'd also reviewed internal material the public hadn't seen yet. Prior complaints against Harlan. Intervention chances that went nowhere. weak supervisory notes, training acknowledgments that contradicted how the officers behaved. The city could no longer sell this as a split-second misunderstanding. It looked exactly like what it was, a preventable abuse of authority carried out by officers who thought nobody in the moment could hold them to the law. Settlement talks got serious once the damages picture fully opened up. And the damages were big, bigger than people think in these cases. Dana wasn't just embarrassed for 5 minutes on a sidewalk. She was handcuffed in front of legal peers, dragged through a station, treated like a liar after presenting real credentials, and forced into a fight over her professional reputation by people who had no lawful reason to start it. Add the constitutional claims, the public record, the city exposure on supervision, and the pattern evidence. 20 million stopped sounding crazy. It started sounding like the number the city had to pay to avoid a worse number later. When the settlement finally hit, it landed like a bomb in City Hall. $20 million. No spin could fix that. Taxpayers understood it immediately. This wasn't an accident bill. This was an ego bill, a badge bill, a nobody told them no bill. Then the career started ending. Harlan was terminated first. The department couldn't carry him after the Bodycam review, the report inconsistencies, and the deposition record. His certification review followed. Then a referral for criminal evaluation tied to false statements and misconduct in office. Whether prosecutors wanted that fight or not, his policing life was done. No decent department was touching him after that file. Kessler resigned before the final discipline hearing. That saved him a public firing, not his reputation. Everybody knew why he left. He'd had several chances to stop the train and chose cowardice every time. Pike lost rank, then lost the job entirely. A supervisor who ratifies nonsense on scene and then backs bad paperwork afterward becomes radioactive once a city writes a $20 million check. Nobody wants that man in command after that. The fallout kept moving upward. Command staff took heat for ignoring warning signs. The mayor got dragged into press conferences. The police chief had to answer why prior complaints didn't trigger meaningful intervention. That's the part departments hate most. One street stop turns into a microscope on the whole chain. And yes, policy changes followed. They always do when money gets that high. The city tightened detention standards, required clearer articulation before non-custodial encounters became forcible ones, expanded body cam preservation rules, forced supervisors to review retaliatory arrest indicators, added scenario training on lawful stops, citizen questioning, and professional identification verification. Useful changes. Also late. They usually are. Dana took the settlement, but she didn't turn into a public victory lap person. She went back to work. That felt more serious than a press tour. She let the records speak. Let the filings speak. Let the city's own signatures speak. People around her said she got quieter after it happened. Not weaker, sharper, less patient with institutional excuses. That tracks. Encounters like that change how someone sees the distance between the law on paper and the law on the street. The ugliest truth in the whole story sat right there in plain view. Dana got justice partly because she had status, knowledge, witnesses, and resources. She knew how to preserve evidence. She knew how to force accountability. She knew who to call and what to ask for. A lot of people don't. They get the same stop, the same humiliation, the same garbage report, and then they hit a wall. That's why this case mattered beyond one prosecutor and 3 bad cops. It showed the mechanism, not just the misconduct, the mechanism. 3 officers thought lunch was the easy part of their day. Instead, they walked into a public record they couldn't bully, a target who understood the rules better than they did, and a city payout big enough to make everybody finally pay attention. That's the story. So what would you have done in that situation? And have you ever seen someone with authority keep pushing just because they couldn't stand being questioned? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share the story with somebody who gets it. And